Good morning, everyone. Today will be our second briefing on what Kentuckians can expect to see in our proposed budget at the start of the next General Assembly. So today, I'm proud to be here with Lieutenant Governor Coleman, the Secretary of the Executive Cabinet and Budget Director John Hicks, and the Chair of the Kentucky Board of Education, Lou Young, to discuss the future of education in the Commonwealth. Lieutenant Governor Coleman and I have always put education first. We stand with our public schools, and we stand with our public school educators. We've protected our educators' pensions, secured modest raises, signed legislation that funds full-day kindergarten, and invested over $240 million in career and technical education. While those were gains, even wins, we must do significantly more to remain competitive and to provide the best for our children. While my administration has been able to keep Kentucky's economy booming, the investments in our schools, children, and educators simply have not kept up. You see, in Kentucky, we have the most jobs filled in our state's history. We've announced more than 870 private sector new location expansion projects totaling over $26.8 billion in announced investments. We believe that is the most private sector investment in any governor's term, whether it was one or two terms. Site Selection Magazine has ranked us number 2 in per capita economic development, number 5 in the country in their Prosperity Cup. Area Development has awarded us its Golden Shovel Award 2 years in a row. Kentucky's become the electric vehicle battery capital of the United States of America. Our robust job creation has been accompanied by rising wages across the Commonwealth. And we have the largest general fund budget surplus ever this last year and the largest rainy day fund in state history. That fund is now at a record $3.7 billion. Put simply, we are on the best economic roll of our lifetimes. But to sustain this roll, we must have a competitive, world-class system of public education. Getting there requires historic investment. It requires historic investment because the General Assembly has failed to do so in our past budgets. Each of my years as governor, we have proposed a robust budget, significant funding for public education. And while the General Assembly has done some, they have not nearly gone far enough. The result? Kentucky is ranked 44th in average teacher pay Kentucky is ranked 44th in average teacher starting pay and 40th in average teacher pay, according to the National Education Association's report of April 2023. We've fallen behind being a state that does not fully fund universal pre-K. We continue to fail to fully fund student transportation so our children can get to school safely and get home on time. This is wrong. And throughout my career, I have fought to address the needs of our public schools. They're the backbone of every community and usually serve as the largest employer in many of our counties. Failing to adequately compensate school system employees makes us less competitive, and worse, it impoverishes our Kentucky families that choose education as a career. Our teachers and school staff are true heroes. They not only educate our children, they make sure that no child goes hungry while they're in school. They ensure every student feels supported both in and out of the classroom, and they work to keep our kids safe every day. Our students deserve a chance at true prosperity and not to be left out of this economic revolution that we are experiencing, which is why I'm taking action once again. Today, I'm outlining highlights from our next proposed budget. These won't be all of the various funding related to pre-K through 12 education, but they are some of the major. My proposed budget aims to help create the system of public education our kids deserve by first providing an 11% pay raise for all public school personnel. This would be the largest single pay raise for public school educators in at least the last 40 years. Second, my next budget will fund universal pre-K. Third, it'll fully fund student transportation. Fourth, It'll fully fund teacher pensions and ensure there is no health insurance increase for school employees, meaning that 11% raise will be a real raise, not one impacted by other costs. Fifth, we'll be increasing student loan forgiveness for teachers. Sixth, we'll better support professional development. Seventh, we'll better fund textbooks and technology. Eighth, we'll boost mental health services. And ninth, we'll provide additional funds to build and renovate more career and technical education centers. Now let's walk through each of these briefly. Let's start with the 11% pay raise for teachers and all school staff. Based on the most recent reports from the National Education Association, Kentucky teachers currently rank 44th in starting teacher pay, with an average starting salary being $38,010. KDE reports this average starting salary has risen to about $40,156, but there is no data from other states for comparison because that's the most recent info, and other states have raised theirs too. This NEA report is the most cited a study for comparisons in media and otherwise. In fact, the Bluegrass Institute here in Kentucky has even used it in a number of their reports. This is the best document and report we have for state-by-state comparisons. My Education First plan provides an 11% raise for teachers and all school employees, including bus drivers, cafeteria staff, and janitors. This increase would bring Kentucky's average teacher starting salary based on the NEA report to $42,191, which would move us from 44th to 24th based on this study. Or, using KDE's current figures, would bring the average starting pay for our public school educators to $44,573. But this raise is across the board. So existing teachers and all school staff benefit, because when all you do is raise the starting salary, it creates compression. And you lose teachers that may have 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 years of experience when they're paid almost the exact same thing as someone who is brand new. This means that the average teacher salary, not the average teacher starting salary, but the average teacher salary after the raise would rank 25th in these NEA rankings. We're currently 40th. KDE does report that its most current estimate of average teacher pay is $56,375. So the 11% raise on that would bring average teacher salary to $62,576. Again, these are the best comparisons that we will have until the next NEA report in April of next year. Hiring and retaining educators is critical, and we are in a competition for talent. You know, it's simple. You can't catch a kid up on math without a math teacher, and we cannot remain competitive with other states if we don't pay teachers closer to what they're worth. Over the 2 years of this budget, this is a $1.1 billion investment in the salaries of our public school educators, from bus drivers to custodians to kitchen staff to our educators themselves. We can afford it. Our educators are worth it, and they deserve it. The raise I'm proposing is also fair, because while I'm proud that our state employees got a much-needed and deserved 14% raise over these last several years, our educators got on average a 3% raise. That's according to the Kentucky School Board Association. Next, let's talk about universal pre-K. My proposal, which I will be presenting to the General Assembly when they return next year, calls for funding universal pre-K for all 4-year-olds so that every Kentucky child is kindergarten ready. If we want to make sure that our reading scores improve, how do we do it? Ensuring every Kentucky child is kindergarten ready. Pre-K is also an effective time and place to screen, test, and identify learning challenges. So those young children that are going to need additional or different help can get it right from the start. Think about what that could do with such early intervention. This type of early childhood education is proven to make sure that children have long-term academic success, and funding it is the number one most effective thing we can do to get more people back to work. Others know this, and more cities like Cincinnati are investing in pre-K. They're not only helping their students succeed, they're also supporting new mothers or fathers by helping them get back into the workforce and saving them thousands of dollars they might otherwise pay for childcare. And I remember when I talked about this, when we were, I believe, in Lexington, and an educator came up to me and said that she had considered leaving the profession because her childcare cost almost as much as she made a year. By doing both of these, we can not only help all of our families with young children, but we can certainly help our educators even more. Today, I also want to announce my administration's doing more to support state child care providers. Thanks to an influx of federal dollars, we freed up $50 million as part of the ongoing child care assistance payments to provide an additional payment this December to support our child care providers. Making sure our children have great care and are able to start their education journey off on the right foot will continue to be a priority for this administration. Next, let's talk about transportation. Like the last budget I proposed, my plan fully funds student transportation. Again, we presented that last time to the General Assembly, and unfortunately, they failed to do it. Now we're seeing the impact of that decision with major transportation issues that have disrupted learning for many of our students. The General Assembly has refused to give districts what it costs to bus our students, and they've refused to give a big enough salary increase to attract more bus drivers. So if you don't fund what it costs to bus our students, and you don't have competitive salaries to have enough bus drivers, yes, you are going to have problems. Now it's time to step up, to take these actions, and to leave no excuse to any school system on their transportation plans or operations. Next, my budget will fully fund teacher pensions, and it will ensure that there will be no health insurance premium increases for our school employees. This will be the fourth straight year these employees would have no insurance premium increase. That means that 11% raise is a real raise, not offset by other costs. In this upcoming budget, I continue to support a student loan forgiveness program that will help teachers pay for their education and their continuing education. We want the very best educators, and we want them to get the most advanced degrees they can and are willing to do so. And we ought to be willing to help that. This is also a retention benefit because it forgives a maximum of $3,000 for teachers who teach each year of employment in public schools. So every additional year they teach, they are encouraged and rewarded for continuing their career in our public school systems. And sadly, we too often hear of teachers who are working a second job just to make enough money to live, to pay for that child care, or to pay for these student loans. My budget plan will also continue to support teacher professional development by restoring past cuts from the General Assembly. These were things the General Assembly used to fund. And despite having a record budget surplus before the last budget session, despite having the biggest rainy day fund we've ever had, the General Assembly has not funded the professional development that we require our teachers to have. And we want our teachers to get the very best new techniques to address learning loss, to address the complicated emotional complications and challenges that kids today face living in a much more complicated world. If we want our teachers to be the very best and to teach at the highest levels, we have to fund professional development to help them do so. We're also making sure students have the resources they need by providing funding to replace textbooks, technologies, and other instructional resources. This funding will help restore past cuts by the General Assembly, and it'll make sure teachers don't have to dip into their own pockets to pay for needed supplies in the classroom. This is basic. Our children can't learn if they don't have the resources to do so. We have an obligation to give them our very best, to make sure they have new or gently used textbooks, to make sure they have the technology that you have to operate in this world, and that they are learning on the type of technology they'd be expected to use in the workplace. In addition to being an education-first administration, our team has always believed that mental health is just as important as physical health. To make sure educators have access to training on how to best help our students with mental health, I'm providing funding to assemble staff in social emotional learning institutes. Any teacher can tell you how important these services are, and soon you'll hear from Lieutenant Governor Coleman about her work in this important area. Next, we have some exciting news for career and technical education. We are booming in manufacturing, and this is next generation manufacturing. If you go like I did to Blue Oval SK and look at where they're building the 2 largest battery plants on planet Earth, you will see how high tech they are. Each of these plants is almost a giant clean room, and where the humidity and other conditions have to be. Our future of manufacturing are in lab coats, not what you might see inside your mind. And so we've got to make sure we are updating our training. And every time that we invest in one of these career and technical education centers, it is a jobs magnet where people can see where their employees are coming from. New employers can put their newest equipment in them or provide a curriculum. And that means that those graduating seniors that decide not to immediately go on and pursue higher education can be trained for a local employer and be ready to go to work immediately, earning competitive wages where they can support themselves and others. We've already invested over $245 million in the last 2 budgets in these renovations. Our next budget will propose another $100 million in one-time funds to provide grants to continue to build and renovate career and technical education programs. These are just highlights. These are just highlights of what you'll see in our proposal, and we'll be sharing more in the weeks to come. With a record budget surplus, the largest rainy day fund in state history, and good economic conditions, we not only can afford this, but we must make this investment. We must keep Kentucky competitive by investing in our schools, our teachers, and our students. We recognize the future is being built in our classrooms today. Let's support our educators who are working hard to ensure our future is as bright as it can be. They are depending on us to get this done so they can prepare the next generation to continue the success we're seeing. Right now, with a booming economy, we have the chance to leave a collective legacy that's not mine, but all of ours, of more opportunity for every generation that comes after us, to truly turn Kentucky into an economic powerhouse, which means we no longer have a brain drain, but we start seeing a brain gain, that our talented young people can pursue whatever career they want, however big their dreams are, and they can do it right here in Kentucky. To continue this historic economic role, we must make these investments. We must invest in our educators. We must invest in our public school systems. I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Hicks, who's going to talk about how affordable this is in this next budget. And then he will turn it over to Lieutenant Governor Coleman. Secretary Hicks.
Thank you, Governor. I'm going to give you 2 pieces of information that talk about why what the governor is proposing today is affordable as we move into the next biennial budget process. In the year we're in, fiscal year 2024, the general fund revenues exceed the recurring expenditures from the general fund by $1.4 billion. So that is the starting point for the next biennial budget. So in essence, we have $1.4 billion in headroom for funding and new spending as we move into fiscal year 25. Let me give you another data point. In the year we're in, based upon the current appropriations and the revenue estimates, we will end this year with another $1 billion surplus. So the first point I made is about recurring spending and recurring revenues. The governor mentioned $1.1 billion over 2 years for the 11% raise and some of these other items. There is still plenty of space for other needs and other demands in this next budget. On September 25th, our consensus revenue forecasting group will meet for the first time and give a preliminary revenue estimate for the next 2 fiscal years. But even as we look at this current year, we already have space as we move forward in time in the budget for these new investments. Thank you, Governor.
Good morning. Let me first say that I am so grateful to be in this position and to be here with you all today. We have not had an educator in this seat since Martha Lane Collins, and she was governor more than 3 decades ago. But thanks to Governor Beshear's unwavering commitment to education, we have and always will be an education first administration. And as you can imagine, this budget and this subject is personal to me. I've walked in the shoes of our educators who wake up every day with one goal, and that is to help their kids in their classroom become better today than they were yesterday. They're selfless and they're virtuous and they are honorable. And I know this because they are my colleagues and they're my friends. And I even happen to be married to one. And they don't deserve to be treated like political footballs. What they deserve is a governor who has their back and a lieutenant governor who has walked in their shoes. They shouldn't be subject to a passion tax, taking less salary, benefits, resources simply because they love the work and the kids that they serve. The future of Kentucky's booming economy is in our classrooms today. That makes our teachers the original job creators. And I would argue there's not a more important job than that. While they are molding young minds, our future engineers and electricians and entrepreneurs, they are also shouldering the weight of their own uncertain financial futures. They suffer from inadequate pay, continuous loss of benefits, paying out of pocket for their own classroom resources, and no relief on rising student loan bills, let alone saving for their own children's education. And we came to Frankfort to change that. This budget addresses all of those needs and more. Our budget passes my test for any education policy. It puts students first. It supports the people who show up for our kids every day. And it gives our schools the resources they need to do what we've asked them to do. Let me be clear. This plan is not about throwing money at an issue. It's not political, and it's not red or blue. It is a Kentucky issue, and it is incumbent upon leaders to work together to make sure that our systems and our outcomes are better every year. It's about, as Governor Beshear likes to say, leading with our values. So I'm going to turn it over to someone who I know has led with her values her entire career and is currently serving as the chair of the Kentucky Board of Education, Lou Young.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much to Governor Beshear, to Lieutenant Governor Coleman, and for the entire team for prioritizing public education funding and for supporting Kentucky education leaders, teachers, and school employees. This is my favorite time of year. This is my 41st back to school year. And every time the new sneakers and the waxed floors and all of that just gets me really excited. And this is happening all across the Commonwealth. But it's an especially stressful time for those superintendents, principals, families, students in those areas where we have teacher vacancies, even today as we go back to school. And there are far too many of those, including educator personnel, bus drivers, paraeducators, and employees all across our districts. So I think the importance of what we've heard this morning is that we are boldly addressing the compensation for teachers and school employees, along with shoring up pensions, providing high quality professional development, affordable health insurance and childcare. All of these are critical if we really are going to make a dent in the educator workforce challenges that we face today and to fully support our Kentucky public schools. I'm proud to share that the Kentucky Board of Education also prioritized the educator workforce, universal preschool, and fully funding transportation in our budget requests at our August meeting. On a personal note, I wear these bracelets to remind me of they have the names of my 4 grandchildren, and it reminds me of my why and why I'm such an advocate for Kentucky public schools. Lord willing, these kiddos will be in Kentucky public schools through 2040. And even though that seems like a long time off, it's not. So when I imagine their public school futures in our Commonwealth, in my mind's eye, I see high quality, happy, well-compensated educators and personnel all across the system, bus drivers, counselors, principals, nurses, secretaries, and food service, and anybody I may have left out of the equation. Investing in Kentucky public schools is an investment in the future of the Commonwealth, in our workforce, but most importantly to me, it's an investment in the future of our children and youth. Thank you.
We'll open it up to questions. And a first since I've been governor, we don't have Tom Latek here, but his birthday was Monday. So happy birthday to Tom. We have 3 journalists here, 4, I think now with us here, and 3 on the line. So we'll start with Sarah.
In 2019, the General Assembly passed the School Safety Resilience Act, and that included SROs and mental health professionals, an unfunded mandate. How does this include funding for that, and how will you convince the General Assembly to fund it this time?
So these are just some of the highlights of what we'll see in our proposed budget. We are still looking at the numbers as they come in on SROs. I believe that every school should have an SRO. I believe that it is critical because if the worst of the worst happens, they need to be there. You know, we just previewed the report coming out from the school safety marshal, and there's been a significant increase in the amount of schools that have SROs. But we do need to continue to move in each budget closer and closer to 100% coverage. The question of how do I convince the General Assembly? Well, we've gotten a lot of things passed in these last 4 years. You know, I was told that we could never get medical marijuana or sports betting passed through the General Assembly, and we got that done. We got $500 million of clean drinking water funding passed, the largest public sector investment in broadband passed. We got some teacher raises passed the last time. Thankfully, this next session of the General Assembly will be after this election. There will be less politics at play, and hopefully everyone can sit down because I plan on still being here, knowing that I can't run for a re-election after that, and have the conversations about how much we have to invest because of how far we've fallen behind. But I think we got a pretty good track record when you look back and you push out all the noise for getting things passed and for getting some really good budgets passed as well. Carolina.
Governor, there have been concerns raised about the learning loss that happened during COVID. Do you believe this proposal does enough to address that?
The biggest threat to continued learning loss are vacancies, are either vacancies overall, where you don't have a regular teacher in that classroom, or a vacancy that occurs when you don't have someone trained in, certified in a certain topic. Now, our kids fall behind when we don't have the very best of the best, and if we don't compensate more, then we're not going to be able to give them the best. But the professional development key here, I think, is really important, because this isn't something that is Kentucky specific. It's hit every state pretty similarly across the country. And so we want to make sure we have the very best training to catch people up. But when you look at test scores, right, yes, we want to catch people up from the pandemic, but they were going down before that. We want to make sure that we start addressing some of the root causes. And universal pre-K is the best way that we can do that. And we have far too many Kentucky kids that by the time they start kindergarten, didn't get to do what my kids did, which is have multiple years of preschool. If we can make sure that everyone is kindergarten ready, our test and reading scores will go up, and we see that. We see that in the underlying data. So we believe that this is a comprehensive proposal that, yes, will help catch our kids up. That is not a 6-month or a 8-month process. It's going to take some time, but I get to see it day in and day out. You know, my kids are in Kentucky public schools. They went through the pandemic like all of us, and watching their test scores improve each and every year certainly makes me believe that we are at least moving on the right track if we address the systematic issues that were there before the pandemic. Sylvia.
The Daily Beast published an article, I believe it was this morning, detailing sexual harassment within the Attorney General's office. Have you seen this article yet, and do you have any comments on it?
I was able to skim the article this morning, and it is highly concerning. You know, you have a duty in these jobs, especially when you're over an office the size of that one, which is about a couple hundred people, to create a positive work environment. And certainly when your highest level supervisors seem to have multiple complaints about how they talk to people. Well, first, I mean, it's a real problem, especially if it rises to the level of harassment because it becomes illegal. But outside of that, if you're not providing a constructive, positive environment, you're not going to be able to attract the type of people you need to succeed. I mean, an important office that's supposed to be out there protecting us, fighting the drug companies over prices of things like insulin, when you have allegations that top-level supervisors berate other people, it raises some real serious concerns. My other question is why it hadn't been made public before now, because it seems like there are just a number of complaints. I certainly hope that we will hear directly from the Attorney General, because you got to have responsibility over your office, address what's going on and how to fix it. I believe,
what does it mean to you to fully fund transportation for students? How is it outlined in your proposal, and how would that potentially help what's going on in Jefferson?
So the numbers are the numbers. Each district puts in what their cost is and asks for that in the budget, and the General Assembly has been shorting school districts each and every year. I believe the last budget, Jefferson County was shorted about $19 million. And so imagine having that extra funding, but then imagine being able to pay your bus drivers 11% more. All right, there is a lack of bus drivers in every school district. It hits Jefferson County significantly. Imagine having the funding that it takes to be able to put it towards addressing this problem. Now, Marty Polio and the school system has taken responsibility, and they should, right? Not running from an issue, but trying to fix it, and they should be taking responsibility. But at the same time, the General Assembly is also at least partially responsible by not stepping up and providing the funding and adequate pay to attract enough bus drivers to get the job done. I think on the line we have Shelby from KET.
Good morning, Governor. We heard yesterday from Attorney General Cameron and from the FOP that one reason some are throwing their support behind Cameron is because of his relationship with the legislature and his perceived ability to capitalize on the policies he's proposing. Do you think your relationship with the legislature could hurt your reelection chances?
I believe I have a track record of getting the hardest things imaginable passed. They said that I couldn't get sports betting or medical marijuana passed while I was governor, and guess what? We got the job done. People have been waiting for those for over a decade in Kentucky, and we got the job done. You look at our past budgets, and significant portions of what we pushed for have ended up in those budgets. You look at the expansion of healthcare, getting laws passed where mental health has to be treated as physical health. We talked about that while running. If you go back to 2019 and the things we're talking about, we've made significant progress or gotten legislation passed on so many of them. And I believe that compares favorable with any other governor of any other party. But if you look back historically, you will also see that just because a governor is of the same party as leadership of the General Assembly doesn't mean they're getting along. There are a lot of examples of that, from Matt Bevin's difficulty working with the General Assembly, calling a special session without telling anyone, that lasting, about an hour. We have established over 4 years a relationship. It's not always a perfect relationship, and certainly you're not going to hear good things from the other side during an election, but certainly the type of relationship where we can get these things done. But in the end, when we fought for medical marijuana, Daniel Cameron wasn't there. Didn't help. And we got it passed. When we fought for sports betting, Daniel Cameron wasn't there. Didn't help. And we got it passed. All these past budgets, $500 million in clean drinking water, broadband, $240+ million in career and technical renovations. It goes on and on. Daniel Cameron wasn't there. He didn't help, but we got it passed. If Daniel Cameron has such a great relationship with the General Assembly, where's he been? Right? Why wasn't he pushing for teacher raises in any of the last 3 years if he claims he could get it done? Where's he been on other plans that are out there? The fact is, we've been out pushing and getting the legislation passed that needs to get passed. Austin Horn, Lexington Herald Leader.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. This is a bit of an unrelated question, but I'm wondering if you think, as head of, or unofficial head of the Democratic Party in Kentucky, you're the top elected official, do you think you bear some responsibility for the legislative numbers of Democrats dwindling in recent years? And if you win, would that be a goal of yours to get that trend reversed?
Well, right now I'm focused on being the best governor I can be day in and day out for all Kentuckians of all parties. Yes, I've got duties related to the Democratic Party, but my work day is about delivering for the families of Kentucky. It's about creating record numbers of jobs, securing investments that make us the electric vehicle battery production capital of the United States of America, working on 3, what they said were impossible infrastructure projects: 4-laning the Mountain Parkway, building the Brent Spence Companion Bridge, and moving I-69 forward all at the same time. There are no red or blue bridges, and a job isn't Democrat or Republican. Certainly, if you look at the last couple of years, you got to include redistricting in those conversations. I believe and continue to believe that an independent group should do redistricting because at the end of the day, citizens should choose their representatives and senators and not the other way around. My number one and overall goal, provided I win re-election, is just to be the best governor I can be for all Kentuckians, regardless of party. And I'm hoping after this that we can push out a lot of the noise, that people can stop yelling at one another just because of a box they may have checked when they were 18, or even if they've changed it. We have so much that unites us. And I think our faith and our values tell us that everybody's our neighbor, and we're supposed to care about them and love them regardless of their party registration. And there are enough threats outside the United States that want to harm us to where we shouldn't be fighting with each other. We should be one state. We should be one country. And on this great economic boom, we can all prosper together. Karen Czar, WUKY.
Thank you, Governor. Yesterday, when he released his education plan, Attorney General Cameron showed numbers of the decline in learning and attendance. They were numbers, when I asked him specifically where they came from, he said that basically they were compiled through his campaign researchers. So my question is, did you have a chance to look at them? And if so, how do they compare to statistics that you have? Thank you.
I've not looked at numbers he put out at his press conference. I think that I saw a picture of the press conference and it had a picture of me. And when you're running for governor, at some point you have to talk about what you're going to do and not simply why you dislike the other person. We are at a point in this campaign where we ought to be talking about real ideas and real solutions. And let me tell you, we use a lot of numbers, and rightfully so, people look at them. The same level of scrutiny ought to be done and ought to be engaged in for both candidates for this office. So I know, Karen, you and others are probably busy on the fact check. We today were very clear in where our numbers came from. Again, the NEA study, which came out this year in 2023, there'll be another one next year. We even talked about how the numbers have improved since, though there's no benchmark for comparison because we don't have how other states have improved. But I think that this is a good guide, especially given that we know Indiana and Tennessee have both been working to increase educator pay. And so if there was any question about whether this is political, I've talked to the Republican governors of Indiana and Tennessee, and we all agree that this is something we have to do to remain competitive. And this is something that's important for the country, and that it's not red or blue. It's just absolutely necessary. And we cannot allow states around us to increase pay significantly and us not do it. That means we won't just fall further behind. We will lose our great educators to other states. Those are our talented young people, and we cannot let that happen. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. We have no Team Kentucky update today, but we'll be back with it next week. Thank you all.